hello, hello. Ooh, too exciting. You can hear me. Well, hey, look at you wonderful people. Thank you so much for coming. I think I'm too big for this. I don't think it'll reach. Oh, no, maybe it'll. Can you attach it to my. I'm sorry, it's rather an intimate question, isn't it? But if you can attach it to my back, that would be fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming. Look at you, you wonderful, wonderful crowd. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Office documents, and I'm going to start early so you can get to the important unconference earlier. Yeah, and first we're going to start with the very bleedingly obvious. So the first thing is that I can't solve all problems in the world, but here is a sort of a map of the world. And I've stolen this from Frank, you'll be pleased to know, Anna. So we've been doing a study recently on where your data actually is, and who has access to it, and also where your chips come from. Where is the foundation of everything electronic that you might expect? Now, lots of these things were invented in the UK. Well, in the past. Way, look at that, a bit of gratuitous nationalism. But these days, it turns out, after a lot of research, they all come from here, right? And unfortunately, there is, between San Francisco and Seattle, where Microsoft lives, and Amazon, and all of these wonderful people are there, and all of them have access to your data. And this is quite possibly a problem. Arguably, there's a bigger problem over here in Asia. So at 90% of the less than 10 nanometers. Actually, probably 92%, because South Korea is the other 8%, right? That's a real problem. I can't solve this problem because this is hardware, but I hear there are hardware people here, so you get on with it. But on the data side, there's something we can do to try and get our data out of these wonderful, upstanding companies. Now, they may be absolutely wonderful. Actually, there are some people that used to work at some of them here. I was talking to Will earlier, who was at one of them. And no doubt he can give you the inside lowdown. But yes, unfortunately, the internet that we created to be all sorts of robust and wonderful and decentralized and clever and scalable has been centralized by all of these people. And they create services that are honeypots for hackers. Of course, all software has problems. It's hard to avoid that. I'll show you some of the things we do to avoid that later. But at the end of the day, there are honeypots there. If you can find one day zero in Microsoft Azure, you get access to this wonderful treasure trove of stuff, don't you? It's all at your fingertips. And so you just massively increase the risk by this homogeneity of these big centralized services, quite apart from the routing and network infrastructure risk. So Collabora spends quite a lot of its time trying to suck at least some of these pieces out and get things decentralized again, as God intended in the first instance. So there we go. Woo! So digital sovereignty. So yeah. And of course, the other tragedy of big proprietary centralized services is that you really just can't do anything about it when they go wrong, or they annoy you, or there's some horrible drop-off. I think there was this great metaphor of buying a car with the bonnet welded shut. So you get the car, but you can't possibly maintain it or do anything to it. You are totally at the mercy of the car salesperson. Yes, this is the wonders of AI. It's getting better. I get AI to draw this picture from time to time, and it is not actually Bill Gates welding your bonnet shut, but it could well be. And so it's so interesting, software. It's just so creative and fascinating that excluding people from fixing it and being able to do what they want with it is just tragic. And that's particularly so as the world is eaten by software. I think this is a great, I forget who the quote came from, but it's fairly true. Software can make hardware actually work really well. And it's amazing where software is. So for example, just your power supply, your switch mode power supply, you stick 240 volts in one side, and out comes this beautiful, 12 volt, 48 volt, what a DC. This is actually controlled by software. There's a microcontroller in there making the decision when to switch the switches and get the inductors and capacitors charged and so on. It's just amazing. It's in absolutely everything. And as the world gets better and better software, it optimizes more and more things. And I guess AI is going to do this more and more with robots everywhere. The idea that you shouldn't be able to look at this stuff, that it should be a black box, that you shouldn't have any rights over it, becomes more and more of a disaster for our society. And so there's various different ways of looking at this. There are lots of different words for the thing I used to call free software as a young man. Richard Stallman, that's where it should be. Open source, perhaps a more business-friendly way of explaining that. Digital sovereignty, a very political, semi-nationalistic, sort of way of controlling your destiny. Right to repair, brilliant for the farming lobby, look at the farmers are wonderful, aren't they? They're a very tiny proportion of our national income and a huge proportion of subsidies. So they obviously have political clout. So wouldn't it be great if someone made their tractors unrepairable and made it, require DRM in each component so that political lobby suddenly realizes and gets what we've been going on about for years and, actually gets involved with the right to repair, which is basically the same thing, isn't it? Open source, free software. I want to be able to repair my tractor. And I can't. Why not? Fix it, politicians. And great to see traction on that. Great to see traction, back in the day when we had open document formats, and we were talking about the proprietary formats of Microsoft, we had great traction with politicians. Because as every wannabe politician knows, everything they do and say now is going to become of incredible significance later when they become prime minister. And so it's really important that very long archival material of their whole life's work and speeches is actually under their control and available to them. Anyway, so we had a great traction getting people to open up document formats. I think we have some success with that. But all of these are really just different ways of explaining the ultimate free software, free culture, freedom message that underlies all of that. So, yeah, we talk about many of these things. It's also really encouraging, and none of this is on my slides, I'm sorry about that, but I was at Open Forum Europe conference in Brussels recently, and often we hear people from the political left talking about the joy of sharing and freedom and collaboration and so on, and all that's true and wonderful. But there we had Dirk, who leads Schleswig-Holstein, which is one of the biggest migrations to the Linux desktop that you're going to see, using LibreOffice, Collabora support, and Nextcloud, various other pieces there. Really exciting migration. And he's standing up and saying, I'm a conservative, and we're doing this to increase competition, open markets. He's quoting Schumpeter, and just an extremely conservative perspective on this is absolutely vital to stimulate and mend broken markets. And so it's just really nice to see that consensus coming together, forged by the need for digital sovereignty. And why is that? Well, here's quite a negative framing. I think Sir Richard Moore, head of MI6, says this: the data trap, if you allow another country to gain access to really critical data about your society, over time that will erode your sovereignty. And this is a guy who's very used to finding out dodgy bits of information about people and twisting them to make them into agents and subverting societies. And, that's his brief, right? Hopefully in a good way, but, because he's one of us, right? But it's quite a profound insight, isn't it, from the other side. Now, this is quite an old quote. That's many years ago. In recent time, there have been a whole load of innovators in this field who have tried to expand sovereignty in all sorts of interesting ways that look like this. So these people are lending a whole new meaning to the need to be able to make your own weapons, make your own software, understand, run your societies that have been eaten by software and don't need healing, by the application of, if only you give me Greenland, all will be well, this sort of thing. So it's amazing the traction we get in Denmark. We're doing some big pilots with ministries in Denmark. And again, it's great to see political unanimity there across the aisle. This is a strategy that commands respect and support, both from the left and right. Doesn't matter who's in power, we've got to do something about this. Get control of our own technology. So we're at an inflection point, and it's really, really exciting. Primarily because we've been doing this for years, and finally people from many different places and strands are starting to understand it. So that's cool. That excites me anyway. Right, well, so when you get cut off, and your software is pulled, or your updates are pulled so you remain insecure, or whatever, what do you get? Well, I'll just give you a little flavor of that by one key difference between Collabora's Office suite and Microsoft's. So Microsoft have really two products. with this one goal behind them. And so they call them the same thing, Office 365, just to maximize confusion. But there's actually two totally different products in there, totally different code bases. And so we have this desktop Microsoft Office, the full functionality. Of course, that's a bit of a problem because it would be better if all of your data was owned and controlled by Microsoft now, wouldn't it? That would make everyone feel good. So we have, cloud-first save, so when you save your new document, it really pushes you towards saving it in OneDrive. Or how about auto-save by default into the cloud so that, you don't even have to make the choice. It just does the right thing for you, or something. Then, of course, there's Microsoft Office Online, the second product, which has very limited functionality. I'll come to that in a minute. And the good news is that to use it, your documents already have to be in Microsoft's cloud. And there's a whole load of sort of comparisons here. This is a great comparison between the desktop and the web version as to some of the things it can and can't do. Cover pages, no. Embedded objects, no. ActiveX controls, fair enough. You need Windows for that, right? And so it goes on. Very different capabilities, different compatibility issues, and yeah, lots of problems. Actually, even the pages explaining the differences are inconsistent. So, there's a whole load of things that are supposed to or not supposed to work, depending on which web page you look at. And so, ultimately, whilst all of your document data should go into the cloud, ideally, you should continue using Windows. And, so there's a series of small adverts in the software, and these adverts have a cumulative effect over time. And they go on and on. I mean, I think if you really want to understand what they're trying to do, I think keeping people on Windows becomes a clear message here. So you get the best of having all of your data in their cloud, but actually you stick on their operating system. So the end result here is, of course, that you then have this division of software between desktop and online, which can be really unhelpful in terms of management, duplication, and so on. But just consider, this is how it's supposed to be. This is what's meant to be there, right? How much worse can it be if the plug is pulled, right? It can be really, really bad. So one approach is totally different, is to use one code base and have it work in these two worlds, the desktop and the browser, so that you have the same features, the same training, the same everything, of course, 100% open source, and it looks the same. I hope you noticed this. So essentially exactly the same feature surface where we can do it. So yeah, and a whole lot of apps, spreadsheets, Impress, the whole shebang. It even looks pretty and hopefully easy to use and learn. And yes, here's my advert ends. Right. So yeah, we're doing this really for a lot of people at some quite large scale. I think there's over 1 million people in the Ministry of Education in France using a combination of Nextcloud and Collabora Online, which is kind of cool. And we're really innovating, and I'd like to show you some of these things, but let's just look at what it is first. So, browser-based. All of this stuff is deployed there, and it's a first-class citizen. Easy to deploy. Multi-user editing, You can get all of your rabbits to co-edit concurrently. And of course, you can see what they're doing as you go through. That's great. Lots of commenting and redlining and change tracking and all of that good stuff. We even have a rock star feature. I don't know if who uses redlining a lot here? This is the audience interaction piece. Okay, it's just me. Well, I'll tell you my story then. So I use redlining a lot because I do legal contracts, and I've been tragically perverted into being a business person from being a free software hacker. And I continually try to get back, but what can I do? Anyway, so here I am watching the lawyer deal with some big contract. And I say, they've removed our important clause again. Let me put it back. And so she selects the text with the red line struck out. And what you could do is you could undo their red line, so you could reject their change. The problem is there's no record of that happening, right? And this is very, very bad etiquette in contract ordering. It's very important that everything you do is redlined. Otherwise, people will not trust you at all, and your interaction will get very, very bad. So, so what she does is she selects the text, she copies it, she rejects the change, she copies the text, she undoes the rejection. Okay, so now in our copy-paste buffer, we have what was originally there, and then she pastes it in again. That's a really weird thing to do. Do you do that often? Oh, yeah, all the time, All I want is to be able to say, give me back my text, and here's a red line that does it. So, well, magic, not the world's most difficult feature to implement, extremely useful, and not there for 25 years. We really need some innovation in this space. Did I mention that? So yeah, making it pretty is nice, little pop-downs and drop-downs, all sorts of interoperability features there. Obviously, all of the Microsoft formats are vital. There are really vast numbers of documents in those formats we need to suck in, but lots of nice PDF stuff too, and we can embed things in PDF. Now, we also run VBA macros. Look at that, isn't that fun? A triumph of BASIC back in the day. So Microsoft, for all of its scale, has made some interesting design decisions. One of them was that as soon as we embed a macro in a document, it better continue working. If anyone remembers Word 95 to Word 97, they basically broke a whole load of macros, like they really did. They upgraded Visual Basic, and then there was a program that kind of tried to make it port across. And actually, when we see macros these days, we still see the magic object that has all of the compatible things on it being used in modern macros on modern machines. So, you can see files today that were clearly made in Word 95. And have been migrated ever since. So that's quite funky. They got so much negative feedback, I suspect, that they decided, well, that's it. We're going to copy and paste Visual Basic into Microsoft Office. So they took that whole product, they put it in, and it has been there ever since. Now, isn't that fun? And at some point, they wanted to port to Mac. So that was great. They copy and pasted all of Microsoft Office, tens of millions of lines of code, and they ported it to Mac, and that was great. And then Mac upgraded their operating system from PowerPC to Intel. You may remember this. And at that point, they chose to use GCC as their compiler. And the GCC compiler wouldn't compile all of this obsolete stuff that had been copy-pasted, twice already. And so they didn't have VBA on Mac for years while they tried to rewrite this hyper-optimized assembly, which is quite amusing. But anyway, we support VBA, and we support it on all sorts of platforms. We support only the macros we have seen so far, and that customers asked us to fix, which is not everything, but quite a lot. And of course, it has to be turned on. It's not on by default, actually. The admin has to admit that this is something they need to do first. And then the user can get to choose too. So, you think, well, yeah, fair enough. I mean, an Office suite, it's not very difficult though, is it, right? The browser does everything for you for free, There are hundreds of little markdown editors out there, aren't there, I can, wikis, of course, taught us all to love, learning a new rule language. You put a star here and a square bracket there and a bracket here, and they took us away from that WYSIWYG world we were used to. And slowly we're getting back to there with layered plugins on top. But there are just loads and loads of little noddy markdown editors. But let's just start with a little bit of some of my world of Office, if you like. Hopefully you find it interesting. So, there's some really simple things here. So back in the day, we had monospace fonts, and they were all the same width of characters, and they were nailed on the screen out of a terminal, 8-bit characters, and the world was beautiful. And then someone thought, well, my I is a bit narrower than my, S, so I should have a nice narrow I. And probably my T is narrow too, and my L is very narrow, but my P is quite wide. And so we had all of these proportionally spaced fonts. And they look beautiful, obviously. They're the majority of fonts. This is only used as a sort of cue that there's a retro programming language about to be used. So our tabs line up nicely. And so, yeah, so wonderfully, we have a thing called Unicode that standardizes all of the characters so that you know that this number is that character. And that's beautiful. And it unified the whole world. Everybody came together in a wonderful international group and standardized something. Isn't that a beautiful story of joy? Well, not quite. So WebDings is one very obvious problem, that there are loads of blinking things out there. And in WebDings, the alphabet is actually random different characters like ships and presents and so on. So that's a little bit annoying, but at least we can map this as we interoperate. We can convert those to the Unicode equivalent. Life is good. Unfortunately, there's one country in the world. Now, is it Thailand or Myanmar? I don't remember, but there was some very senior executive there who decided that this was a bad idea, Unicode, and that they should do something totally different, and invented a new font called Zorgi that he then ensured was used everywhere in government, It's amazing the power of top-down management if you try. And this totally tramples on Unicode, so that the same characters have totally different meanings. So we're sort of back to the horrors of 8-bit characters for one country and one place in the world. Very unfortunate. My hope is the Unicode Consortium will solve this eventually, so we wave our hands and pretend it doesn't happen. But still, the font is important, it turns out, which is quite annoying. Now, one of the other problems is de facto standardization. So Microsoft have deployed a very large number of fonts, and you probably know them. They started off with things like Arial and Times New Roman. And these were not so bad because they were based on widely understood font metrics from Adobe. So they had all of the widths of the glyphs were understood and known. At some point, they decided, well, we need new fonts. So they invented a thing called the C-star font set, so the Calibri and all of this sort of font. And these fonts were proprietary. And that's fine, and Microsoft can ship them. They bundle them with their software so the document works and all is well. The problem is, we don't have those fonts. So on Linux and free operating systems, when you load it, your slides look wrong, right? And that's not good. So thank goodness, Red Hat and Google, between them, I think, invested in creating metric-compatible fonts. So what does that mean? That means that although the Fox looks different, well, so I think this is the wrong one. Maybe I have a right one. Although the glyphs look slightly different in shape, they're the same width. Does that make sense? So all of your things are in the right place. That's great. Now, of course, PDF does this by actually nailing glyphs on the screen in exact positions. Okay, so if they don't have the font, things might start to overlap and look awful, but at least the layout is the same. And actually, Adobe's thing has this wonderful meta font thing inside it that will scale glyphs to need. And increasingly, fonts are going in this direction. Actually, if you see the new fonts from Google, Roboto, if you're interested in typography, has a whole load of parameterized things. So you can turn the same font from an italic to a thin to a narrow to a bold, and it just does it magically. It's really cool. So Microsoft thought, well, we should catch up with that. So we've just caught up with Calibri. We've got our metric-compatible fonts. So they're creating new ones, Aptos, which is great. So now there's a whole new family of fonts we don't have metric-compatible equivalents for, which is a shame. So there's something of an arms race of chasing that design goodness. But there's another slight amusing feature, which is that spreadsheets are super important. The world's decisions are made in spreadsheets. And it turns out that if you get your spreadsheet text slightly too wide, your whole cell turns into a hash. That's not good. You don't want hashes everywhere, do you? This is bad. Very small changes in fonts, like, oh, I think the X is slightly wider than or the W is wider than the something, can then cause knock-on problems in your spreadsheets. Obviously, particularly with numbers, but also with strings. So this is a nightmare. So the punchline is that over time, our fonts are getting narrower and narrower and narrower, so that as you upgrade between fonts, you can still see the numbers in your spreadsheet. So I confidently predict by 2030, all of our numbers will be incredibly thin and will be incredibly tall. But there we go. Let's see. So right to left. So all of this is quite easy. I mean, this is the easy end of Office productivity. It's pretty trivial. It gets more fun with the right to left. So, you have to, be doing this, but how hard can that be, right? I mean, that's just, you just get a mirror, right? Invert everything, and life is good. Although, when you start inverting some of the icons, particularly the right to left and left to right icons, you have problems. You need different ones for that. And also, as you're typing mixed language text, so, the Arabic goes this way, and then the English goes this way, and then the next bit of Arabic goes that way. So like mixes of these things, the cursor management is really fun. You press the left arrow and you jump massively right, and then you go left, and then it's just good fun. Anyway, but not conceptually difficult at all. Now, laying out text seems simple as well, right? Like you just measure some strings and you nail them on the screen, right? How bad can it be, right? And we can just go on creating more and more paragraphs, and we stack them in, and that's all good, right? Well, the problem with this are many. So one of the things is there might be a footnote. Footnotes are really fun because, of course, the footnote needs space on that page. And so you can end up in a situation where you can only fit the footnote on the page if the text that refers to it isn't on the page, right? So you end up with this kind of loop of, well, maybe you could shrink the footnote space and put it on the next page, or maybe, it all becomes more and more fun. Maybe you've got a table that's got to go in somewhere, and maybe that table is in some columns, And maybe you've got the feature on that says the columns should be beautifully balanced so that they're of the same length, so they look visually nice. And maybe then you're justifying it as well. And that means you're going to need to split words and hyphenate them to get the space right. But you really want to make sure you hyphenate words in the right place, right? So this is a, you can get some very rude situations if you accidentally hyphenate words in the wrong place, for example. So ideally, you need a dictionary-based hyphenation. Here's a single German word in Google Docs, which, as you can see, is something like the captain of the ship on the something of the... But it's a complete mess because of where it's broken. It would be much better to smart justify it and hyphenate it nicely. So, yeah, not as easy as you might hope. Now, of course, this is still the simple stuff. Then we get on to the complex text. So, some people's languages go left to right, and some go right to left, and that's fine, but we're all still going top to bottom, okay? Other people, their text goes top to bottom, and then round and top to bottom again. So if they're going to scroll, they're scrolling this way and not that way, which is great, right? And of course, interestingly, the same language can go in multiple directions if you're particularly lucky. And that's okay, but also, you can put Ruby above your text. So Ruby is these little interpretive things that go above a complicated character. So I believe this says Japan, something like that. Is that right? Tokyo. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, you can read the English. That's brilliant. So you see the critical function of Ruby text, right? And so you might think that actually this is something you can automatically put in, but the problem is the choice of characters and what you write, and whether you even write the same thing or not, conveys a whole load of interesting, rich semantic information. Poets love it, And it also helps people learn to read, actually, and understand what characters mean in their context. And the good news is that the web browser does almost all of this for you, and you never know it. Until you want to do something like pagination, proper layout, at which point you have to throw away everything the browser does for you for free, and you have to reinvent all of it, okay? So you get to choose where all of these glyphs go. And the good news about that is that then when you print it, there's a chance that instead of, when you print a Google map, you end up with this like weird square in the top left corner and loads of wasted space and stuff. Well, one of the reasons for that is that that doesn't even know the page size. The web is so paranoid about information leakage, it won't tell you the page size. And, the APIs for doing this are really bad. But either way, if you generate the PDF yourself, having done the layout yourself and put every glyph somewhere, you can actually get, quite a good result. And so, yeah, so this, have a PDF will travel, and, the fingerprinting scares in the browser are pretty serious. But we still can't find out what a paper size is from a browser, which is kind of bad. Yeah. So anyway, text is easy. Anyone can do text editor. But what about spreadsheets? So spreadsheets are fun. And spreadsheets are fun because people misuse them left and right. But they do this because although a database is the right answer to every problem, as you know, and probably we should, the number of SQL-like databases shoved gratuitously into products is quite scary, isn't it? But anyway, although that's true, you have to go and ask IT. And then have a 6-month meeting to sit down and work out how to analyze the right. It's a human disaster area. And so much better to just pull out Excel, do a few scripts, grab some data, shove it in, see what happens, right? And then make a business decision and hope that the 1 in 20 cells that contain an error wasn't too close to the critical path. So yeah, anyway. So there are lots of different ways to store data in spreadsheets in memory. And one of our top feature requests for a while was having 64-bit support for zip files. Now that sounds a madness. We don't actually have 4 GB zip files, but what we do have is lots of XML inside them, right? The XML compresses really well, but the streams are really huge. And so how do you store all this data? Well, there are a number of problems there. So just from an API perspective, you see these APIs that are like, give me all of the cells. And then I'll iterate through them, right? But the problem is, what iterator are you going to use? If you're doing it by index, you're going to need a 64-bit number because 16,000 columns, 1 million rows, 2 to the 34 possible cells. That's just a bit big, isn't it? Yeah, it takes a little while to do 4 billion, even 16 billion iterations through something, even on a modern CPU. We used to have a very nice way of representing it. This was just a row and then a cell pointer, which was kind of funky. But it let us use a thing called interpolation search. I don't know if there are any computer scientists crept into the room by mistake. But anyway, interpolation search is really fast. Log n. It's unbelievably good. Unfortunately, it's horribly pointer chasing-y, and it's really bad news for performance in other ways. So now we have spans of, raw data types sitting in these great things, which is great. And then we look those up log n, but there are these great chunks of data. And we can use SIMD arithmetic and all sorts of things to speed our computation up and thread it and do all sorts of clever things. Or the modern world is rewriting everything in JavaScript, which is just great. If it's in JavaScript, it must be good. And so they basically use sparse arrays, which is like a hash table on an array index. So you take your array index, 5, you hash it. And in theory, this is constant time, but it's a disaster from a performance perspective. So, yeah, what can you do? On the huge 64 bits parsing stuff, we have actually something which is quite fun, which is a constant time XML parser, which is to say that we can parse any size XML file in a linear amount of time, in a fixed amount of time, which is quite a trick for any computer scientist who walked in. Of course, it's also a total cheat. This relies on you having a thread that does all of the actual parsing, unzipping, and whatever, and throws you over pre-digested stuff. And all we need to do is sort of fill the first buffers and then just stream it away, and your XML parsing is free, which is kind of nice. Hard to do in JavaScript with their model, really. So let's talk a little bit about compatibility interoperability, because even if you've solved all of these problems, you have to get the data in and then do something fun with it, right? And there are trillions. This is a real number, not me making it up or a politician saying it. It's trillions, right, of existing documents out there in these wonderful file formats that have been handed to us. So, yes. And so we have all sorts of problems. So this is, I think, a real customer problem. And what we do is we compare the layout of documents to see if it's right, okay? So we render once, we render twice, and then where it's different, we put it in red. And as you can see, this is not quite as it should be, right? And that's bad. So we should do something about that. So we do. So we fix that. Now you can still see there's bits of red, but this is actually pixel errors because of different font glyphs. So you can see the metrics are the same. It lays out to the same length, but around the edges, the pixels are slightly different. So it gives you these red fringes. But broadly, our table is right. And the punchline here is that there was one number wrong in the file format. We were misinterpreting compat 12 with compat 15. Well, what is that? So the file format, although it is several thousands of pages and wheeled in literally on a trolley if you print it out, hard to lift, has little things in it like this. Magic, the compatibility mode, which locks it to a given word layout engine. Of course, none of this is described. What you get is you get a number, which goes from quite small to quite large, omitting 13, very important, superstitious reasons. Maybe we should use 13 when we write the files. Let's see what happens. But, and so, it's not just being compatible with one Office suite that's important. There's a whole set of them to be compatible with. And layout is fundamentally not standardized, so none of the details about how this looks is written down anywhere. I mean, there are hints, there are descriptions of the properties, but they're very, very vague. So here we have a vertical offset issue fixed, which, yeah, is reasonably typical. And you think, well, okay, well, fair enough. But we might get that wrong, but at least we'll get the images right. We can load and show an image. Surely, that's easy. Well, we get bugs of the form, my chart doesn't show up. The picture of my chart is not there. Turns out, this chart is actually a Windows API dump, right? At a very low level, someone has basically looked at all of the Windows API rendering calls and streamed them into a binary file. And they call that a WMF file, a Windows meta file. And because the rendering model was based on effectively Windows 16 back in the day, single-bit alpha, no transparency, no anti-aliasing, really stuff, they actually do it twice. So they have that, and then on top of that, they have comments. So the original format had a comment record in its binary stream. And if you look in the comments records, you see these sort of stacked layers of more modern rendering means there. So inside you can have an EMF or an EMF plus, which also relate to different stratas of Windows rendering infrastructure. And that hides all sorts of stuff in those comments. So if you look in the comment, you could actually get something totally different. It's like the modern joys of e-invoicing, where if you read the PDF as a human, it can say something totally different to the XML. And this is brilliant, because the government has recently mandated e-invoicing, and you can bet your bottom dollar that the compliance people read the PDF, and the machine processes the XML. So soon we will all be rich. Look at that. But anyway, so all of these different things then layered into this binary file. And yeah, every OLE object has a preview that renders like this. Actually, this is one here. It looks very innocent, doesn't it? Innocuous. But underneath, it's a screaming nightmare. Of course, the customer doesn't realize this. They just think it's easy, right? So maybe you don't now. And there are little records in there like PostScript data, embedded PostScript data. You know, what are you going to do with that? There's a whole programming language in there that's needed to render it. There are more modern things like smart art. I don't know if anyone's played with this beautiful way of laying out dynamic diagrams. You know, you add some bullet points and you apply a schema and you get this wonderful different diagrams. Very nice. You see loads of them in presentations around. No real specification for it. Very little documentation. There's a constraint-based solver shape layout language underneath it that's embedded in your file. 700 plus lines of that to describe a single shape. And they have all very helpful, names like type is W, this sort of not very helpful stuff. Anyway, if you solve all of those, eventually you can lay out this as it was intended, which is quite fun. So yeah, the summary is software is hard. And Office is particularly more so because we have to reverse engineer this black box, which is Microsoft's product. And there are a whole lot of axes to software engineering that people sort of ignore that make the demo, transitioning from the demo to the product, unbelievably tricky. So, anyhow, the good news is we've tried a lot of work to standardize documents. And we have a thing called the Open Document Format, ODF. There's increasing interest in it as a sovereign document format. And Sun really pioneered this, zipped XML, instead of bit packing. We used to pack bits very carefully. How many bits in a row, how many bits in a column, can I pack all the bits carefully into my binary format? Years of work spent doing this. And when we switched to XML, which is basically no pre-optimization at all, it's these massive strings, and then we zipped it, it turned out the files got significantly smaller, and hence often faster to load, particularly if you're clever. So that just shows you the joy of human ingenuity. Anyway, there's a lot of good work there, and actually Public Software Inc., Simon Phipps is a hero. Please do congratulate Simon if you see him around. Shake his hand and say, thank you for all your good work on open source, to keep him going, because he's got a lot more in him, if you see him. But anyway, he's been helping to fund the editor of the technical committee, and he's even managed to get money from Microsoft to fund ODF format standardization. So look at that. What a hero. Anyway, and then, of course, there's OpenXML. And when we write OpenXML, I was there for the very first standardization meeting. I was on the standards committee for my sins. And they really did wheel this thing in to hand over to the European Union, the great first draft. One of the problems was that the standardization was very different to what we were doing in open document format. So I think Sir Humphrey says, get rid of the difficult part in the name. It does much less danger there than in the text. And the open bit, well, you could turn up, and what you could do is you could describe Microsoft's format better and better. You couldn't change anything in it. There was no way to improve it in any way, but you could help improve the words that described it, which is one way of having an open standards format. Anyway, so let's just think about mismatches in those standards. So one of the things we have in ODF is we have a field that is the number of slides in your deck. Actually, you can see it here. I'm going to go quicker because anyway. Microsoft don't have that. Now that seems pretty silly, doesn't it? How hard can it be to add a field that has the number of pages in your slide deck? It's just an integer. You know it, right? But it's basically not there, right? So when we interoperate here, we have to do something horrible. We have to either inline that thing or hard code it so it's now a number instead of a field. And that's just really not great, right? There's just no good way of solving this. And of course, when they export, well, their users didn't have a chance to do this at all. So, yeah, it's kind of really, really unfortunate. And you get these impedance mismatches. Actually, some of these things, we spend a lot of time on interoperability just burning down problems. Some of these problems here are like, Collabora Office can render images in footnotes, so you can anchor an image in a footnote. Now, that's quite complex from a layout perspective, as I mentioned in terms of these loops earlier. Microsoft can't do that. The file format can represent it. We can save this into docx file, no problem. Just fine. And we can load it from the docx problem, no problem. Using the standard language grammar, but Word won't accept it. It goes, this document's broken. And, well, what do you do? So there's a whole load of nasty decisions at the end here. But either way, we do a lot of systematic testing there. This is a fun one. So just forget about all of this stuff. Throw away all of the complexity and rewrite it all. And this is another thing I'm often told. And ideally in Java, or with operational transforms, or CRDT, or the latest good idea, right? And this is not just me saying this. Smart people say this too. Larry Ellison said exactly this, Yes. And so you can predict the dead language of the future by seeing, Actually, one of the really interesting things about JavaFX is, the Gartner hype cycle thing, And you pay expensive consultants, and you come to believe that they know nothing relatively rapidly. But actually, the hype cycle does exist. The way that most people avoid being measured as to where they are on the hype cycle is by naming their technology with something totally generic. So if you're creating a new programming language, call it Python, because there's a whole load of pet owners that will hide you. Call it Java, because there's a whole load of coffee owners that love it. Call it Go, because it's completely unsearchable. Anyway, or Rust, or something like that. And all of these welders out there will rescue you from the hype cycle. But unfortunately, with JavaFX, well, this didn't happen. It's too easy to Google. So if you Google that, you can see something that looks suspiciously like the consultants might actually know something. Anyway, there we go. The problem is that when we rewrite software, it takes multiple person years, 8 million lines of code. Just doing a simple thing to add layout to our dialogues to make them pretty, multiple person years. I think, 2012 to 14 of our, probably the best developer in LibreOffice. Operational transforms, just rewrite everything, in such a way that you can reorder things, and there's this wonderful representation of every change and what it does. And once you've done all that, you get undo for free. Well, that's brilliant, isn't it? But actually, undo is really quite an easy thing to do. You just remember what was, and you put it back again. It's not that bad. And this turns out to be really, really complicated. The latest fashion is CRDTs, which is conflict-free replicated data types, which are very good for very simple data types. If you have Markdown or chat, like text messaging, you can pretty much solve it. In text messaging, typically more messages arrive, and occasionally they're deleted. But you don't get, this message depends on that one for its theme and its color scheme, and the font metrics over there, and you don't get these complex treed interlinked data structures. And so, although all of that can be fixed by applying GUIDs to everything and flattening trees and coming up with all sorts of amazing horrors and bloating your data structures massively, when you save it in the file, there's no real space for any of that, so best of luck, And also our state space is horrifyingly complicated. There are so many mines in the minefield, there's more, there's less field than mine. To some degrees. So, just trying to find the valid states, minimum cell height, the cell in my table must be at least this big. But if you change the page size to be smaller than that, well, what do? How does the layout algorithm try and solve the impossible? And so there are a whole load of impossible scenarios you can easily get by co-editing. Here's another simpler refactor. Using native widgets instead of built-in widgets. Again, years of people's work. 2 years, from February 2018 to 2020. Well, maybe not quite 2 years, but lots and lots of work. And we managed to port GTK3 just in time for the GTK4 to come out. And that broke the threading model that we needed, right? It was baked into our understanding of what a toolkit was. So GTK4 will never be fully reliable on Linux, unfortunately, with that code base. Luckily, it gave us a foundation for our web dialogues. So, yes, the triumph of optimism and hope over experience is everywhere. But at the moment, we do have a plague of new simplified Office suites. And in the end, they will create nightmare new file formats that I will have to support for another 20 years. So here we have all of this complexity. And with this, I'm going to really whiz through these slides. How do we secure it? We use all sorts of very clever things, jails, each document in a container, and so on. We have a bit of user-level permission stuff, sharing permissions that are hard enforced, user permissions of how documents can be shared and sections edited and so on, but these are all user-level. We're doing a whole lot of things in terms of switching views, but yeah, I don't know. Trying to make it familiar and look ergonomic and work nicely is good. So, these pop-up little tool palettes that look nice near your selection, making it easy to find things, and particularly the things that you want. Multi-page views recently. Better tab switching. User experience research, loads of it. Watching what people do. What are the things that they undo, particularly? Probably they didn't want to do them, right? So let's watch what people undo and try and work out how we can not do that in the first place, or steer them to make it prettier. There's quite a lot of things that people do, so, there you go. And we've been just improving this a lot. So document comparison, I'm fed up of people saying, the text is red and it's got a strike through and I can't get rid of it. This is the kind of user feedback you get about redlining, unfortunately. People basically don't understand it. So what about a two-up editor where you can see there are two copies of the document, one with, one without, merging it across? Of course, you've still got the whole, I want to search by, filter by certain different dates and so on. But yeah, just making that more powerful. What else? E-signatures, all sorts of fun stuff. Someone has no sense of taste in color. I'm sorry about that. But either way, table styles built in. Per user sheet views, great fun feature so you can see the same data with different users differently. Improved mobile use cases. I mean, it's very distressing that your screen is quite as small as it is, but if you have toolbars and pop-ups and formula wizards and other stuff, you basically have nowhere for the text that you're typing. So better to fix all of this. And I know people are big lovers of AI, so there you go. Just to point out, this is off by default. So you need to turn it on, much like the VBA stuff. But still, obviously, you can use any AI model you want. You should be using a local one, ideally. Buy some GPUs. It's easy and cheap. Or something, yeah. And of course, the document content's only shared if you actually select it and actively ask the model things about it. Obviously, we don't want your data. We don't even host Collabora Online except as a demo, so we're not trying to rob your stuff. You should host it yourself on your hardware and run it with your own local AI. We also have this wonderful thing called a MCP API, so you can remotely talk to it and ask it to interrogate and change documents. And then lots of silly chat things plugged into a sidebar, so you can improve your text about beavers and generate the critical images that you must inject into your documents, debug your spreadsheets. 1 in 20 cells contains an error, so get the AI to find it. And nice things like being able to click on the spreadsheet cells, actually interacting with your selection properly and talking about that piece and not the whole document. So some nice things there, fixing errors and so on. So lots of fun built-in stuff, and all this is coming in 2604, which is out shortly. So how to get free again? Well, step one, just download and you're done. If you're an end user, very easy. It's free to download, get it. If you want to, pay for services to support and sustain it. We have a very interesting problem with governments. I don't know if anyone's worked with governments, but they're very interesting bodies. And the intersection of open source and governments is a very interesting one, primarily because when you tender, often you tender for the lowest price for a thing, right? And the problem is, in our world, the thing is open source, so anyone can provide the thing for nothing. That's not very good for sustainability now, is it? And the problem is that it's fair enough. These procurement people think if you can legally provide the thing, the binaries, then obviously you wrote it, and you're competent, and you can support it. And this is totally untrue in open source. And so we see tenders that are won, well-meaning people that want to support open source tendering, and the tenders go public, and they are won by people, and they think they've done a good thing. But the people they win from are bottom-feeding scumbags who contribute nothing to the actual software and actually have no skills or experience in doing anything either, and have cleverly pitched the price point at an unsustainable price. That means the death of all of us. So wouldn't it be better if there was a way to fix that? And there is. The trick is to read this. Selection criteria for sustainable procurement. This is a German document translated, interestingly. And this basically explains how you need to get competence, not just software, right? You really need to be able to to pick the right people who can invest and sustain and grow your software. So there you go. Floss is special. And a little bit about us. 70 people, hopefully a UK success story so far, to be fair. The people are all over the world. We have a German subsidiary, lots of people everywhere, 25 countries, lots of products, 13 years. The parent company is a consultancy, also UK-based in Cambridge, a Montreal office, 150 people, and they're doing cool stuff as well in the parent company. So they're trying to get software from the bottom up to be open source. I think there's got a lot of hardware-y people around there. So if there's a medical device next to your bed going ping, ideally it should be running Linux. And on top of it, you should have as much open source of the stack as possible. And so Collabora enable that. If you've got a robot lawnmower, that should be running Linux. If you've got a car, that should be running Linux. There's a whole open source operating stack. If 3D virtual reality is going to be the future of the world, and some years ago people thought that, though it turns out this immersive thing I'm in now is really great, then OpenXR is your friend. And there's a whole open source infrastructure there as a strategic punt in case the world went that way to make sure there would be an open source foundation. Increasingly used lots of places. And loads of places, digital signage, cars, Steam decks, all sorts of things. We work everywhere to get open source from the bottom up. Because our mission fundamentally is to make open source rock. That's what gets us up in the morning. That's what makes the shareholders happy. That's where we put your money if you pay us. Although, we do also sponsor conferences. So there you go. If you're here and you like working hard and you appreciate people that do things rather than talk about them, I have a comic for you. And I write a comic every week. There's a beautiful QR code here that I believe if you're young, you can take a photograph of and get a URL. But doesn't work for old people, which is amazing. Anyway, there's a URL there, and it tells the story of all sorts of beavers doing fun things. And better than that, I have a whole load of these here. So you need to think of a clever question to ask at the end, and maybe you'll get one. Actually, I have quite a lot, so I'll be at the booth later, and come and see me. But yes, this is an avatar for perhaps a long-suffering spouse who is missing their hard-working member of their family who is busily typing for some reason. And yes, rather fun. So there we go. Documents are really critical. In my view, they're the most strategic piece to cut that last tie to Windows and to the Microsoft desktop. They're a key piece of any migration away. And Collabora is really the best place in terms of experts to do that. We have a community project. Everything we do is open source. It's a fun and friendly place to get involved. You can go and check our code out on Microsoft's wonderful. Actually, the GitHub CEO was a friend of mine, old friend of mine for a while. Yeah, and we have lots of things. You can get involved. There's all sorts of stuff you can do. It's really our pleasure to sponsor OggCamp. So thank you so much to you guys for all you do for free and open source software. Thank you. Time for questions, or not? Time for questions? Excellent. Okay, well, if you don't have time for questions, there's a special insurance for beaver throwing, but madam, you seem to have your hand up. Anyone else want one? Otherwise, yeah, shoot. Question? Why a beaver and not a squirrel? Well, that's the thing. A beaver is a nature's engineer, you see. They make things. They do stuff, you know. You turn your back, and you look back, and your field is flooded, and there's a dam, and the whole world is changed. And yeah, that's why a beaver. Anyone else? Does anyone have family that... Yeah, here we go. I think there's probably a special, as I said, insurance for these. Do come and grab me at the end if you don't feel like braining your neighbor with a flying marmot. So, there you go. Does anyone have questions? At the back. You'll have to come forward at the end, I'm afraid. I'm weak. All of this typing in dark rooms instead of calisthenics. Good. Questions? Other questions? At the back, sir. How is it possible to keep going for so long? As in, how have I managed to profitably have a career for 26 years working on free software? Is that the... 72 people, yes. Well, so, ultimately you have to sell things. I'm sorry about the commercial pitch at the end, but it's there for a reason, So, yeah, I think it's a good question. And one of the problems, I mentioned the tendering problem, but also it's really nice if we can sort of segment volunteers and home users from professional users. Unfortunately, software freedom is for everyone, right? And that includes big corporations that have loads of money and are saving loads of money by migrating from Microsoft. So in theory, those people can do that. But I would just like to try and encourage a sort of a moral sense that you should get support and you should pay for it. And if you've got the means to contribute, you should contribute. There are loads of volunteers who pour their time into doing good things, and I salute and honor them. There really are. It's amazing. But it does really help to be able to have sustained professionals who have 20 years of experience of these problems to try and solve them. And yeah, we just encourage people to do support. We do that through partners. So we have a large number of partners that we go to market through. So, HCL or Nextcloud, OwnCloud, Pydio, Cfile, Kiteworks, Dell. There's just a vast number of these people, and we sell through those routes. And to those people, we are the experts, and we provide support and services for their users' problems, and we solve them. We have a ticket queue that's about 30 tickets long all the time because it takes that long to understand the problems and solve it, not because we have 30 problems. So that's a great service. And unfortunately, people have been trained that software comes pre-broken, and you have to adapt to it. So a very typical deployment scheme for a big company is to get the piece of software and intensively test it and pilot it, knowing that if you accept it in a slightly broken state, that's it, you're doomed. It will never be fixed. So you better check everything right now, and then you deploy it. And that's just a tragic way to train people into, So we come along and we fix stuff, and we make it better. And if customers want new features, we add them. And if that would make their business easier or save them clicks, we do that. And we love to talk to them. So we hope that's valuable. Does that help at all? But no one said you're playing the easy level trying to build an open source business. This is definitely ultra hard level monster killer spree. But against that, it's not also incredibly different. You need to build a great brand. You need a sales team. You need a marketing team that generates leads. So I have 5 or 6 people doing marketing. We have two full-time salespeople, 3 sales engineers who help customers get set up and work out how it goes. That's the quite traditional bit. Unfortunately, I should have a bigger marketing and sales team, but I have a passion for writing open source software, so I invest in engineers instead. It's a total failing. I should hire many more marketing. If you want to become a technical salesperson or a marketing specialist, come and see me. We are actually hiring all sorts of people. So, a long and rambling answer. Definitely observes a beaver or 2. So, how much more time do we have? Because I can fill. Yeah. But one more question? 15 minutes. Good Lord. Well, anyway, do leave if you get... Sir, no. What's the relationship with LibreOffice looking like? You see, this is a guy who's read his news recently. This is very up to date. You can do QR codes too, I bet. Well, read the comic. The other thing is that, so for those who don't know, the Document Foundation, which I founded and was on the board of for 10 years, and after another 5 years has decided to, I just don't want to talk about it very much. Let me talk instead about the British Counselling Association of Professionals. Because if there is any organization that should have good internal relationships, you would assume it would be the Counselling Association. But instead, they have a massive fights and politics and infighting and throwing people out of the organization and legal actions and changes to all this sort of thing. I think it's quite often the case in non-profits, particularly if you have money. One of the real skills in life is not to have money, and then you don't attract the wrong kind of people, Like a rich man's money may ransom his life, but a poor man hears no threat. And I think, the love of money is the root of many evils. See what happens when you give someone power. It's a great test of character. Those are my general thoughts on it. But either way, the punchline is all of my staff and myself have been thrown out of the non-profit we founded for being totally evil, or for potentially voting the wrong way in the upcoming election, which is delayed. But beyond that, I'm not going to talk about it. I just, let's do something cool and fun. Shoot. I'll get to the gentleman because he was first. Yep.
The compatibility issues for file formats will ever be solved?
Will the compatibility file format issues ever be solved? It's a really good question. One of the interesting things is how little innovation is going on at Microsoft. So Microsoft has also got these compatibility issues between different versions of its own product. So there's not a huge amount of change there, actually, in the core stuff. So I do think that we can do an even better job than we do now. And it's really good. Our whole business runs on it. you know, we have huge customers migrating away. Yes, you may see some slight changes in your document layout, but compared to not being able to operate, potentially, that's nothing, isn't it? I mean, people say, oh, we should delay, we should do all these other things. But actually, if you need a plan B so that when your enterprise is rooted or got rid of, we're way better than nothing. In fact, we're so much better than nothing, almost every business can run on it right now, right? Like, there's really no barrier. So I don't think we should ever not do stuff because of these problems, if that makes sense. In fact, we should rapidly be migrating now. It works. It saves money, but that's not the reason to do it. It gives you flexibility, digital sovereignty, the ability to control your destiny. And so, yeah, don't get scared about my interoperability stories. If that's the message, you got the wrong message, but it's probably my fault. So. That makes sense? There's not a gentleman behind the lady that had the first question. Yeah.
So how good is Microsoft's import of open document format? Are they able to render documents accurately from that?
That's a brilliant question. Did you get a beaver? You should. Oh, incidentally, you need to adjust the fluff in the beaver so it stands up, because they get a bit compressed in transit and turn into a... It's a bit like the fonts, you know, that are getting ever taller and thinner, but you know, if you just move the fluff. How good is the ODF filter of Microsoft? So one of the most frustrating kinds of bugs we get is, you know, you broke our document, and actually, we didn't break the document at all. We saved it in ODF. It was fine when it left us, right? But when it got into Microsoft Office, no change tracking, for example. Like, so they throw away flatten all the redlining. Well, that's pretty epic, isn't it? I mean, I don't know, you know? So I think in the same way that Microsoft Office Online is a nasty thing to persuade you there's a cloud version and something, you can easily deploy it, whereas actually you have to still do all of that for all of those desktops. I think the ODF filter is not as good as it could be by quite a lot. And yeah, I think there's obviously resource problems everywhere, and particularly if you duplicate your product multiple times and, you know, you import lots of problems. But yeah, not the best is the answer, but not terrible either. You know, you can get quite a bit of it. Ooh, quite a bit of it will work. Yeah. Now, who was that? Madam, is it a leopard skin? Fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Synthetic leopard skin, I'm sure.
I'm afraid so.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, I do on and off a lot of work in local government in East London. Mm-hmm. It's mainly volunteering, it's mainly third sector. I'm just wondering how much activity there is in that area. The reason I'm asking you about that is that the actual level of technicity is actually appallingly low.
Yes.
It's all spreadsheets, Word documents.
Yep.
I'm not sure that many people even know what a database actually is.
Oh, well, that's good.
So yeah.
Yes. So what do we do about those people? So I think there are quite a lot of non-profits using this sort of stuff. Actually, there's a load of churches using it often because they really care, you know, mission organizations and all sorts of things that want to run underneath the radar of national agencies. Setting up and running this stuff yourself is probably not something that you can ask a non-profit to do, but probably you could host it for them, manage it, you know, have something running in the UK in a data center, in your basement, wherever you like it to be, provide a service to them. And actually, we love to partner with people that have clusters of users doing that. So we provide margin and sell supported product through that channel. We have quite a lot of local governments. The UK is a bit of a laggard, I am sorry, in this regard. Germany is probably leading. France is trying to do its thing. But yeah, the continent is really, really going for it. I hate to say the French are right, but you know, Charles de Gaulle, look at that. You know, less of American influence and more of a. Yeah, he probably wasn't right on much. But anyway, it was you know, it's a sobering reality we have now. So does that help? Come and see me afterwards. I probably answered a totally different question. Madam, get back to you. Okay.
Sorry. You mentioned about education with the French government. How have you been able to access anything within the UK education system? Because, like you say, you know, open source is literally unknown within education, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. So I invested quite a lot in the UK market early on in my business career. I hired a salesperson. I don't know how much I'll say about this on camera. Come and talk to me later. Anyway, it was not an unqualified success, put it that way, for many reasons, partly because we didn't know what we were doing, because we just started a business. And yes, it's funny, I used to work for other people who did all the hard work of selling and whatever, and I had very vigorous views about open source and product positioning and marketing and strategy, all those things, based on exactly no experience at all and no understanding. And having run a business, I'm much more of a pragmatist about this. I have sympathy for other people's problems and so on. But yeah, the UK is has been traditionally a difficult place to start. And we've worked with the Crown Commercial Services. There's some great work to get the Cabinet Office to mandate the open document format, which has been really encouraging. But the follow-through on that has been weak. Some of that's my fault. Yeah, sure. And the pricing is ruinous. Google will give you a free anything to get you hooked, right? Yeah, and so that's a difficult thing to compete in the market with. One of the best things Microsoft could do is double their prices tomorrow for us. That would be really great. That would, yeah. So, shoot, at the back. I think this is the last question. Oh, yeah, probably the last question. I think we're probably getting to the end of the innings, are we, Simon? Yeah. Oh, another 5 minutes. But I get, just
yeah. So I went to Japan recently, and everybody uses Windows in Japan. Do you think the reason that operating systems are popular is actually more to do with document formats than anything else?
Well, I think everyone using Windows is something that happens quite a lot, isn't it? Although the Mac, tragically, seems to have snared a whole load of the Linux desktop love that we had for a while, which is a great, great sadness. I'm always slightly sad, to see people using Macs. Obviously, there are people doing good open source things on them, I hope, as well, but it is just sad to see. So I'm running Linux desktop here, of course, as a big supporter. And actually, as an aside, this announcement that France is going to have a Linux plan for all of their places and their wholesale looking at moving is encouraging, really encouraging, and is driving quite a lot more renewed interest in Linux desktop. So why do people use Windows? Obviously, there's an ISV network effect. That's hugely diluted by the web. I think Mark Andreessen said he was going to turn Windows into a badly debugged set of device drivers, when he created the web browser. And he was right. What he didn't realize was that they get better at debugging the device drivers, and also that, it would take 20, 25 years, right? But I think we're broadly at the point where lots of things now are delivered as web apps. You need Windows less and less and less. But there's still an ISV lock-in there for it. But I think the documents and that document collaboration processing thing is a really key lock-in still. And if we can solve that, then it just becomes uninteresting what's underneath. So use the best thing, which is frankly Linux. And I don't say that just because I'm a passionate free software lover. You can go and find Windows kernel engineers who can talk about the systemic problems of developing Windows. So, in the Linux land, the guy says, and there's great write-ups of this, in the Linux land, if you find a way to take one tick off a kernel system call, or a new clever way of doing locking in your file cache, right, then you're a superstar. People actively encourage you. They say, well, they probably shout at you and use bad words as well, but at the end of the day, you're a hero, right? And yes, you created a lot of work for other people, and there was a huge change, and it introduced some level of risk, and it took a while to get stable, but actually, that's the guy that made it all much better. Now, inside Microsoft, you can look at the Windows source, and you can come along and try and contribute. But if you're the guy that invents the brilliant new thing of doing something, you suddenly discover that's not on the roadmap, and there's no resources to review that, and why are you trying to disrupt what we're doing? And we have a plan for that, but it's done a different way in the future of the something or other. And basically, it dead ends. And that's only a 0.5% win, right? But if you add up enough 0.5% wins, and they accumulate over 5, 10 years, you just end up with a whole way better piece of technology. I think that's basically where we're at with the kernel and much of the base system there. So yeah, I'm quite excited about the potential for moving to Linux and freeing people and having an entirely free world. So come and see me at the booth. Thank you so much for being patient.